Ever wonder what happens when governments go shopping?
Yeah, like a serious shopping spree.
Exactly, not just picking up milk and bread,
Right.
but like the massive world of government procurement,
Absolutely.
where billions, even trillions of dollars are spent.
It's mind-boggling.
Get ready to deep dive into a system that touches every aspect of our lives.
It really does.
So,
What's fascinating is the sheer scale of it all.
okay.
I mean, in developed countries alone, it represents about 12% of GDP.
12%?
Yeah, just think about that for a second.
Wow.
That's more than the entire GDP of China.
That is a massive figure. So we're talking way beyond just fighter jets and government buildings.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Governments procure a vast range of goods, works, and services.
Uh-huh.
I mean, everything from those simple office supplies to those complex infrastructure projects, roads, bridges,
Right.
and even high-tech systems for national defense.
One of the sources actually had a real estate agent discussing how she helps the government lease office buildings. Oh, interesting.
It really highlights how diverse the applications of government procurement can be.
Yeah. You don't always think about that side of things.
No, it's not just what we might initially think of.
Exactly. And it underscores one of the core reasons why government procurement even exists.
Which is?
To provide what economists call public goods.
Public goods.
Yes. These are things that benefit everyone in society,
Okay.
but they aren't efficiently provided by the private market.
So things like national defense,
Exactly.
public parks, streetlights.
Yeah.
I can see how private companies might not be lining up to build those.
Yeah. They wouldn't have much incentive, right?
Right.
To build a network of roads or maintain a national park
Right.
because they can't easily charge everyone who benefits.
Right.
That's where the government steps in,
Makes sense.
using procurement to ensure these essential goods and services are available.
Now, what about things like education and healthcare?
Right.
Those are called merit goods.
Yeah.
While these could theoretically be provided privately, many governments procure them to guarantee that everyone has access.
Absolutely. A key consideration for social equity.
But it's not just about procuring these goods and services, right?
Yeah.
It's also about doing so strategically,
And efficiently.
especially in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Governments have been under pressure to get the most value for taxpayer money.
Absolutely. Every penny counts.
So how are they getting smarter with their spending?
Well, we're seeing a rise in what we call strategic purchasing methods.
Okay, tell me more.
One example is public e-procurement.
What's that?
Basically using online platforms
Okay.
to streamline and automate the entire process.
So like cutting down on the paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. All the back and forth.
Imagine all that eliminated just by moving things online.
Makes things easier for everyone.
Exactly. It's about making things faster, more transparent, and much easier for all parties involved.
That makes a lot of sense. What are some other strategic approaches that governments are using?
Well, another one is centralized purchasing.
Centralized purchasing.
Yes. Essentially, governments pool their purchasing power together
Okay.
to negotiate better prices.
So it's like a massive group discount
Think of it like that.
for governments.
Exactly.
Okay, so instead of each agency negotiating separately for office supplies,
Right.
they join forces to leverage their combined buying power.
Precisely.
Okay, does this always work in favor of smaller businesses, though?
That's a great question.
Or do they sometimes get squeezed out?
Yeah, it does raise concerns about potential downsides for smaller suppliers.
Right.
We'll definitely dive deeper into that later in our deep dive.
Okay, looking forward to that. What other strategic purchasing methods are out there?
Well, we also see the use of something called framework agreements.
Framework agreement.
Yeah, these are pre-negotiated contracts with suppliers
Okay.
for specific goods or services over a set period.
So if a government agency needs office supplies, a framework agreement lets them have a contract in place with a supplier for, say, a year
Right.
at a predetermined price.
Exactly. It provides predictability for both the government and the supplier.
Okay.
Saves everyone the hassle of renegotiating every single time.
That sounds pretty efficient. But government procurement isn't just about buying existing things, is it?
You're right, it's not.
Can it also drive innovation?
Absolutely. That's where the concept of public procurement for innovation comes into play.
Public procurement for innovation.
Yeah.
Okay, so using those contracts to stimulate the development of new solutions.
Exactly.
But isn't there a risk that this approach could lead to governments favoring certain companies?
That's a very important point.
Or even stifling true market competition?
You're right, it's a debate that's ongoing within procurement circles.
Yeah.
Governments have to walk a fine line to incentivize innovation without unfairly tilting the playing field.
It definitely seems like a complex balancing act.
Mm.
So what are some examples of how this procurement for innovation works in practice?
Well, one example is the Make in India initiative.
Taking it?
Yeah, where the Indian government incentivized domestic suppliers in certain industries.
Okay.
The goal there was to boost local manufacturing and technological development within the country.
So by prioritizing domestic suppliers, the government is signaling a commitment to fostering homegrown innovation.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense from a strategic national perspective. But with these massive sums of money flowing through government procurement,
Right.
doesn't the system become a prime target for corruption?
Unfortunately, you're right. Corruption is a serious challenge worldwide,
Yeah.
and the sheer scale of government procurement makes it vulnerable to bribery and fraud.
One of our sources discussed the case of former Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski,
Oh, right.
who was forced to resign due to allegations of corruption
Yeah,
tied to public works contracts.
it's a classic example, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that the lack of transparency can have very serious consequences.
Absolutely.
So how do these regulations typically work?
Well,
What are some of the mechanisms used to promote transparency?
let's explore that further after a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be right back. So how do these regulations typically work?
Right. Like, what are some of those mechanisms used to promote transparency?
Well, one common approach is setting something called thresholds.
Thresholds.
Yes, specific spending limits that trigger stricter procurement procedures.
So, like, if a contract is above a certain dollar amount.
Exactly. Then it would trigger
Actually,
more stringent oversight and transparency requirements.
makes sense.
Think of it like different levels of scrutiny based on the value of the contract.
Okay, so a small purchase might not require as much oversight,
Right.
but a multi-million-dollar project would.
Exactly, because the higher the stakes,
Right.
the greater the potential for corruption or mismanagement.
Now, what about on a global scale?
Well, there's actually an international agreement that sets standards for transparency.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called the Agreement on Government Procurement, or GPA.
GPA. Yeah.
It's under the World Trade Organization, the
Mhm.
WTO. Got it. So this helps to level the playing field internationally.
Exactly. It encourages countries to adopt fair and transparent procurement practices.
That's good to hear. But even with regulations and international agreements in place, corruption can still be a major challenge.
Oh, absolutely. It's a persistent problem worldwide,
Yeah.
and one that requires constant vigilance and effort to combat.
I mean, the sums of money involved are just so vast.
Yeah, that's part of the problem.
It's easy to see how it can be tempting for some to try and game the system.
Absolutely, and it's not just about outright bribery or fraud either.
Okay, what else then?
Well, there's also the issue of conflicts of interest,
Okay.
where individuals involved in procurement decisions might have personal or financial ties.
To the bidders.
Exactly, which
Okay.
can compromise the fairness of the process.
That makes sense.
Fine.
So how do you prevent that?
Well, many countries have rules about disclosing potential conflicts of interest.
Okay.
And there are also mechanisms for recusal.
Recusal.
Yeah, where someone steps away from a decision
Oh,
if there's a potential conflict.
so they don't influence the outcome.
Precisely, it's about maintaining impartiality.
What are some other interesting approaches that countries are using?
Well, one example I find fascinating is the Tender Board of the Kingdom of Bahrain.
Okay.
It was established by royal decree.
Wow. So it has a lot of authority.
Absolutely. They're responsible for overseeing all government tenders and ensuring fairness.
That's a pretty strong commitment to transparency.
Definitely. And then you have Bangladesh.
Okay.
They use something called the Swiss Challenge system for infrastructure projects.
The Swiss Challenge. That sounds intriguing. How does that work?
So a private company proposes a project,
Okay.
and the government then invites other companies to submit better proposals.
So it's like a competitive bidding process.
Exactly. But with an initial proposal as a starting point.
Interesting way to encourage competition.
It can be very effective in driving down costs and getting the best value.
Makes sense. Now, what about independent oversight bodies?
Those are crucial. For example, Belize and Jamaica have the Office of the Contractor General.
Okay.
It's an independent body tasked with ensuring fairness and transparency.
So they're like watchdogs.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
investigate allegations of corruption,
Right.
monitor procurement processes,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure everything is above board.
That sounds like a really important role.
They play a vital role in maintaining the integrity of the system.
And building public trust.
Absolutely. Public trust is essential.
Now, we've talked a lot about regulations and oversight,
Right.
but One of the sources mentions something called the revolving door mechanism in Belgium.
Oh, yes, that's an interesting one.
It aims to prevent conflicts of interest.
Yeah, by limiting movement between government procurement roles
Okay.
and the private sector.
So it's trying to address that issue of people potentially using their government experience
Right.
to benefit private companies later on.
Exactly. It's about breaking that cycle.
That seems like a smart approach.
It is. It recognizes the potential for undue influence.
Now, all these measures sound good in theory,
Mm-hmm.
but do they actually work in practice?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a constant challenge to stay ahead of those who would try to exploit the system.
Right.
And it requires ongoing effort and adaptation to ensure that regulations are effective.
It's a cat and mouse game in a way.
Yeah, you could say that.
Always trying to find new ways to prevent corruption.
Absolutely. And ensuring that government procurement truly serves the public good.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from regulations and thresholds to international agreements and independent oversight bodies.
We have.
But I think it's important to remember that government procurement isn't just about preventing corruption.
Yeah.
It's also about using the system to achieve positive outcomes.
Exactly. It can be a powerful tool for social and economic progress.
So how do we ensure that it's used effectively for those purposes?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore in more detail in the final part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into government procurement.
Glad to be here.
We've seen how massive this system is,
Yeah.
the challenges it faces, and how crucial those ethical considerations are.
Right.
Now let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
Consider the big picture.
The bigger impact
How does all this impact us?
as everyday citizens.
Exactly. Like, we're not all government officials or procurement experts.
Right.
So how does this system actually impact our lives?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Government procurement, it's not just a series of transactions.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful tool
Okay.
that shapes our economies, drives innovation, and impacts the quality of our lives in countless ways.
In countless ways, how so?
Think about the roads we drive on,
Okay.
the schools our children attend,
Yeah.
the hospitals we rely on. All of these are often the result of government procurement decisions.
It's like this hidden force behind so much of what we experience
Yeah, you don't always see it.
in our daily lives. Yeah, we don't always stop to think about it,
Right.
but it's constantly shaping our world.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed, there are challenges,
Yeah,
ethical considerations, complexities that need to be addressed.
right.
But beyond those operational aspects, there's a bigger question.
Okay.
What are the broader societal implications of government procurement?
So how does this go beyond just building a new bridge
Right.
or buying a new fleet of buses?
Exactly. What's the bigger impact?
Yeah,
Well, one key area is social progress.
social progress.
Yeah, governments can actually use their purchasing power
Okay.
to promote sustainability,
Okay.
support small businesses, and advance social equity.
It's about using procurement strategically
Exactly.
to achieve those broader societal goals.
Precisely.
One of the sources mentioned how some governments include clauses in their contracts
Oh, right.
to prioritize working with minority-owned or women-owned businesses.
Absolutely. It's a great example
Yep.
of using procurement to foster economic inclusion.
Yeah, levels the playing field a bit.
Exactly.
Helps to create opportunities for businesses that might otherwise struggle.
Right. And it goes beyond diversity among suppliers, too.
Okay.
In what way? Well, governments can also incentivize the adoption of environmentally friendly products and practices.
We saw that the European Union is pushing for something called green public procurement,
Oh, yeah.
where they aim to have a significant portion of their purchases
Right.
meet specific environmental standards.
It's a growing trend.
That's great. And many countries are incorporating accessibility requirements as well.
Right. Making sure everything is usable by people with disabilities.
It's really encouraging to see how procurement can be this lever for positive change.
It's really powerful when used effectively.
Yeah, it makes you realize that government procurement isn't just about getting the lowest price.
No, it's not.
It can be a powerful tool to shape a better future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it requires a conscious effort.
Right.
It's not going to happen automatically.
So it's about thinking beyond that immediate transaction
Yeah, thinking long term.
and considering the long-term impact.
Exactly.
So where do we fit into all of this?
That's the big question.
We're not government officials or procurement experts.
Right.
So what can we as everyday citizens do to ensure this system serves the public good?
Well, the first step is staying informed.
Okay.
Pay attention to how your local and national governments are spending taxpayer money.
So, like, are they prioritizing sustainability?
Exactly. Are they supporting local businesses?
Are they being transparent about the process?
Those are the key questions.
So awareness and asking those critical questions are key.
Absolutely.
But can we go beyond just observing?
You can.
Can we actually influence this process?
Absolutely. You can engage with the process.
How so?
Attend public hearings.
Okay.
Voice your concerns to elected officials.
Uh-huh.
Advocate for policies that align with your values.
Support organizations working to improve government procurement practices.
Yeah, pushing for more transparency.
Accountability and ethical conduct.
It all makes a difference.
It's a reminder that we have a voice.
We do.
And that our opinions matter.
Absolutely.
We don't have to be passive observers in this process.
Right.
We can be active participants.
Exactly. And perhaps the most powerful action you can take is holding your elected officials accountable.
When you vote, consider their stance on government procurement.
Yeah. Do they prioritize efficiency, fairness?
Do their policies benefit the community as a whole?
It's about making informed choices.
Sending a message with our votes
Exactly.
that we care about how this system works.
That's right.
Government procurement may seem like this dry technical topic.
Yeah, on the surface.
But as we've seen in this deep dive, it's anything but.
It's dynamic. It's impactful.
It's a complex system that touches every aspect of our lives.
And it's constantly evolving.
By understanding it, asking the right questions, and holding our leaders accountable, we can help ensure it's used to build a more just sustainable
and prosperous future.
For everyone.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me.
I'm glad to hear that.
We've gone from demystifying those complex terms.
Yeah, all the jargon.
Like framework agreements and thresholds.
It can be overwhelming.
To grappling with ethical dilemmas and exploring the power of citizen engagement.
Right. It's all connected.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective.
That's what we hoped for.
On this critical, often overlooked part of our world.
It's more important than people realize.
And remember, this is just the beginning.
It is.
Of the journey.
Keep learning.
The more we understand about government procurement, the more equipped we are to demand better,
more ethical,
more impactful outcomes
from this powerful system.
So keep asking questions.
Keep pushing for transparency.
And never underestimate your ability to make a difference.
You have a voice, use it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of government procurement.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.